Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of Wendigo horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story, Wendigo stories. When I was young, I often spent parts of summers with my grandmother in her home out in the country. It was my favorite place in the world, and I always looked forward to the week-long stays of gardening, baking, late-night fires with s'mores and ghost stories, and enjoying having my grandmother all to myself. There was a pond, not far from her house, where I would sometimes go to swim. It was home to quite a few frogs, and at night they made the most incessant noises. I complained to my grandmother only once, saying I couldn't enjoy the night breeze with all that racket. She took me on her lap and told me a story about an old man and woman who lived near a lake. The old man couldn't stand the singing of the frogs, but his wife told him that they kept the Wendigo away, and to harm them would be unwise. Well, he didn't listen, and set about methodically catching all the frogs on the lake. It was a process that took some time, but he did not stop until he had rid the lake of the pesky amphibians. That night, without the protection of the frogs, he and his wife were slaughtered by the Wendigo, a vicious, whip-like demon creature with elongated fingers ending in razor-sharp talons, and rows of silver teeth as thin and keen as needles. I wrote it off as another of her ghost stories, though she seemed more serious than usual about it. I never complained about the frogs again, mostly because I grew to enjoy them and put the story out of my mind. In fact, I'd forgotten all about it until it came up this past spring in a Native American literature class I was taking in college. The mention of the Wendigo sparked that old memory of my grandmother's story. I thought she had made up the word. I didn't realize there were stories about it, originating in Algonquian legends. Eager to connect something from my childhood to the topic, I Googled it, only to find that my grandmother had apparently been mistaken. There was nothing I could find about the story she had told me, nor any references of frogs providing protection from the Wendigo. In fact, the Wendigo of legends seemed very little like my grandmother's version. They were said to be insatiable, craving human flesh, and sometimes created from the forms of people who had resorted to cannibalism to survive. Descriptions varied, but they sounded almost nothing like my grandmother's bogeyman version. I actually chucked as I read it, almost a bit embarrassed by how badly my grandmother had messed up the original tale. I changed residences this summer, moving to a newly built, 1,000 square foot, on each side, duplex on the edge of town. The other side is to be occupied by my landlady, who'd had the place built. However, she isn't scheduled to move the rest of her stuff in and begin living there for a couple of weeks. She's waiting for her lease to end. Even though my new place is only a few minutes from the edge of town, it feels much more isolated. I enjoy the seclusion of my new home and its proximity to a more natural setting. I'm surrounded by woods, and from my patio, I can even see a pond beyond the carefully landscaped lawn, which is meticulously carved out from the surrounding woodlands. Just like the pond near my grandmother's house, the frogs have put up a ferocious racket lately. I prefer not to pay to run my air conditioning if I can help it, so I have every window open to catch a breeze. That means that I can hear them as clearly as if I were standing on the water's edge. It took a few days to get used to the noise, but I'm fine now, just like I was those summers when I was young. In fact, the noise has been comforting to me during the stress of the move. Tonight is different. I find myself standing in my living room, staring at where the pond is, though I can't see it in the dark. The air is eerily still and oppressively warm, but all my windows are shut, and I feel impossibly cold. I'd long since convinced myself that my grandmother's story had been a silly tale, a twisting of an old legend by irreverent storytellers. But for some reason, I have the most overwhelming sense of dread growing in the pit of my stomach. I don't know what to do.
I'm trapped.
Leaving my house means braving the darkness beyond my home, but I don't know if I'm going to be safe in here either. The frogs have stopped singing. Second story. I stayed at the most horrific motel in the world. The first thing that hits me when I step out of the car is the overwhelming silence. Hollow Creek is a small town nestled in the middle of nowhere, with its dwindling population and a sense of desolation hanging in the air. It's different from the kind of place you'd expect to find much work as a freelance journalist. Still, with bills to pay and a need for a change of scenery, I decided to take a chance on this mysterious letter. It said the Whispering Pines Motel is promising a story unlike any other. Now, as I approach the front desk, I can't help but wonder if it was all just a cruel joke. The receptionist, an elderly woman with a knowing smile, greets me with a forced warmth. Her name is Edna, and she tells me that I'll be staying in room 12, just down the hall. As I walk past the reception area, I can't help but notice the framed newspaper clippings on the walls. Headlines like Whispering Pines, a haven for the restless, and mysterious noises plague the night. Stories of guests leaving in the middle of the night for unknown reasons. My room is dimly lit, with a musty odor that reminds me of old books. The furniture looks like it's been here since the motel was built, and the bedspread is threadbare. A small window by the bed is covered by a thin curtain that billows in the night breeze. The motel is on the main road, and the town's only restaurant is just a few doors down and across the street. Walking through the empty street, I notice that most buildings are boarded up or appear abandoned. The only light source comes from the diner's flickering neon sign, casting eerie shadows across the pavement. I approach the diner and step inside. The atmosphere inside is comforting, almost cozy, with the smell of coffee and bacon filling the air. The waitress, a young woman named Lily, greets me with a warm smile and offers to take my order. I play it cool and order coffee, hoping to start a conversation. I can't help but overhear snippets of conversations at nearby tables. One man, who looks like he's in his early 20s, is telling a story about a woman he met at the motel with a haunting past and secrets she's willing to kill to keep. Intrigued, I walk over to them and introduce myself. "You must be Riley," the man says, nodding in my direction. "I'm Tom, and this is my brother, Mark." Mark glances up from his coffee, a cautious expression on his face. "Yeah, we heard you were new in town. Lily told us you're a journalist." "That's right," I reply, sitting opposite them. "I got a letter from one of the motel's former guests, offering me a story. Something about restless spirits and strange occurrences. I was hoping you could fill me in." Tom leans in closer. "It's true, Riley. This town has a dark secret. You see, there was a fire at the Whispering Pines. It started in one of the rooms, and half the building was destroyed when they put it out. People died in that fire, and their spirits haven't been able to find peace. They say you can hear them whispering in the halls at night. I can't help but wonder if there's any truth to the story." Lily arrives with my coffee. I thank her and take a sip, savoring the warmth it brings to my hands. "So, what do you think?" Tom asks, watching me intently. "You believe us?" "It's an interesting story, but I'd like to see some proof before I write about it. Anything you can show me?" Tom and Mark exchange glances, then Tom reaches into his pocket and pulls out a small, worn photo album. He slides it across the table to me, and I open it up. Inside are grainy photographs of the motel, taken years ago. Pictures of the fire, rescue workers trying to contain the flames, and a group of people standing outside the motel. These were taken just after the fire, Tom explains. The woman in the photo was the motel's owner's wife. Her name was Sarah. After the fire, she went crazy and talked about voices in the walls, freed spirits, and missing guests. A lot of people think she started the fire, trying to rid the place of the spirits. I glance back at the photos, taking in the haunted expression on Sarah's face. Whatever she experienced during those dark days left a mark on her. Lily arrives with food, setting a plate of eggs and bacon in front of me. "Here you go, Riley. Enjoy," she says with a warm smile. "Oh, sorry. I actually didn't order anything except coffee. Also, how do you know my name?" I ask, feeling a bit unnerved. "Well, Riley, you see," Tom begins, leaning back in his chair. Sarah isn't the only one affected by the fire. The spirits reach out to certain people and make them see things. And sometimes they share information. You must have something special about you that they recognize. I glance around the diner, feeling a shiver run down my spine. The other patrons seem oblivious to our conversation, lost in their thoughts and newspapers. "So, what else can you tell me about Sarah?" I ask, changing the subject. Tom shakes his head. No one could ever prove anything. The fire destroyed most of the evidence, and Sarah, well, she wasn't much help. She spent most of her time ranting about the spirits. But there were always rumors. Some people said she had helped starting the fire. Others said she was unstable and looking for a way out. As for the guests who went missing, well, no one ever found any bodies. There were whispers that the spirits had taken them, too. He pauses, taking a sip of coffee, and I can see the pain in his eyes. We all thought it was just a tragic accident at first, but over time, things started changing. We'd hear footsteps in the hallway, doors slamming shut on their own. It got so bad that some of us started avoiding the motel at night. "Do you guys work at the motel?" I ask, trying to sound casual. "You seem to know a lot about what happened." "Well, yeah, I've been here for a few years now, and Mark here has been working the night shift. We've all seen and heard things that, well, it's hard to explain." I nod. "So, what do you think happened to Sarah?" I ask, unable to keep the curiosity from my voice. "Do you think she's still alive?" Tom shrugs. "No one really knows. Some people say she's still here, trapped in her room, unable to escape the horrors she witnessed." I glance at Tom, noticing the haunted look in his eyes. "What about you? What do you think happened?" He takes a deep breath before answering. "Sometimes I see her in the shadows, just watching us. Other times, I think she's a ghost, trapped here with the rest of them. But it's clear that something bad went down at the motel. And it's not just in the past. It's still here, lurking in the darkness." The rest of our conversation lasted as long as it took me to eat. I was exhausted and needed to sleep before I started writing, so I went back to the motel at around 8:30 p.m. and settled in bed. I could have sworn I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my room. They were faint, barely audible over the sound of my own heartbeat. I could sleep through it, telling myself it was a staff member doing their duties. I finally fell asleep until I heard this high-pitched, non-stop squeak, stuttering every few seconds. It wasn't loud, but just enough to wake me up. I look over at the clock. It reads 3:08 a.m. I decide to open the door slowly, its creak intensifying the mysterious squeak. Nothing, no one there. I walk slowly as the noise gets louder, but I cannot locate it. I thought it could be an old furnace that they never replaced, but the air in the hallway was so cold. Deciding to believe my furnace assumption, I headed back to my room, but on my way, I could have sworn I had heard someone whispering. When I moved closer, it sounded like it was coming from the walls, just like the town folks said. As I close the door and crawl back into bed, the whispering grows louder, like it's outside my door. It's getting harder to ignore. The whispers are saying something. I lie there, paralyzed with fear, until finally, the whispering fades away into the distance. The next day, I push the strange occurrences out of my mind and focus on my work. I spent most of the day researching the motel's history. As the day drags on, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched, that the motel is alive with a malevolent energy that's intent on driving me mad. Around dinner time, I take a break from my research and venture into town. I'm hoping to find someone who might have some insight into what really happened to Sarah. As I walk along the empty street, the air is thick with anticipation, as if the town is holding its breath and waiting for something terrible to happen. I stop at the diner and take a seat at the counter. The waitress, not the same as last night, an older woman with kind eyes and a knowing smile, sets a menu in front of me. I notice the prices are shockingly low. When I ask her about it, she just says, "Around here, we take care of our own." I order a burger and a soda, hoping to gather enough courage to ask questions. When the food arrived, I couldn't help but notice that it was some of the best diner food I'd ever had. The waitress must be using some family recipes. As I eat, I discuss with an elderly man sitting at the end of the counter. His name is Hank, and he's lived in the town all his life. "You're new around here?" he asks. When I confirm his suspicion, he leans close, lowering his voice. "You should be careful about asking too many questions. This town has a long memory, and we don't take kindly to outsiders who pry into our business." His words chill me, but I can't help but press on. "I'm just trying to find out what happened to Sarah," I say, my voice barely audible. Hank eyes me before leaning back in his chair. "Well, you've got to understand," he begins. "Sarah was different. She wasn't like the rest of us. She didn't belong here." I'm taken aback by his words, but I nod, encouraging him to continue. "But she was still a person, right? She deserved better than whatever happened to her." Hank glances around the diner, lowering his voice even further. "You're right, she did. But you see, there was an incident. Something that changed everything. Something that made people start talking, whispering." He hesitates momentarily, then leans in closer. "You see, there was a time when the motel was different. It was alive in a way. People would come from miles around just to see it, just to see its magnificent decor and lively air." Hank sighed heavily as if the story's weight was too much for him to bear. "Back then, the motel had another owner, a middle-aged man named Jeremiah. He was different, too. He was married to Sarah." He pauses, looking haunted by the memory. "There was a fire at the motel. No one knows how it started, but it spread quickly. Sarah and Jeremiah had 4 boys. 2 of the oldest sons died in the fire along with their father." I let out a gasp, unable to believe the horror of the story. "But what happened to Sarah?" I ask, feeling a deep sense of dread creeping up on me. "She went crazy and locked herself away in the motel after they restored it." She would go on about how she freed those poor spirits. "The now oldest son took over the motel," he says. "Did authorities not suspect Sarah?" I ask. "Oh, they did. They brought her in for questioning, but they were never able to get anything other than her crazy ramblings. They never found enough evidence to prosecute anyone, so it was deemed an accident," he says. I'm stunned. "So, she's still there?" I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Hank laughs. "That's what people around here say, but that was 40-something years ago. and if I'm to guess by her looks, Sarah was in her mid-40s. That would mean she would be almost 80, and I don't reckon she could stay alive that long without leaving her room. But if she really did set the fire and hurt those people, I trail off. Hank shrugs. Like I said, no one knows for sure what happened, and after all this time, it's probably best left that way. He glances at his watch, signaling that the conversation is over. I nod, feeling a mixture of disbelief and horror coursing through me. Something about Sarah's story refuses to let me go. I thank Hank for his time and pay for my lunch, leaving the diner. As I walk back to the motel, I can't help but wonder, was Sarah genuinely insane or just trying to protect something? With its faded grandeur and haunted past, the motel holds a strange allure for me now. It's as if I can feel the weight of its history pressing down on my shoulders, demanding that I uncover the truth. I get to my room and spend the rest of the day exploring the motel grounds. The air is thick with the scent of old wood and damp earth, and the sound of leaves rustling in the distance. I wander past open rooms with peeling paint and boarded-up windows. I find a dusty photo album on a dresser in one of the abandoned rooms. Carefully opening the tattered cover, I discover a collection of faded photographs depicting the motel in its heyday. Couples dancing beneath twinkling chandeliers, laughing children running through the hall. There's even a picture of Sarah and Jeremiah smiling brightly for the camera. I close the album, feeling a strange mixture of nostalgia and sadness. As I turn to leave, I notice a bookshelf in the hallway. Most books are dog-eared romance novels, but one title catches my eye, The Haunting of the Hotel Amity, a true story. It seemed morbidly fitting for the scene, but I decided to move past it and head to the front desk to interview Edna. The afternoon passes quickly as I spend time with Edna, listening to her stories of working at the motel and meeting various guests. She speaks fondly of Sarah, insisting that she is a good woman who only wants to protect the place she loves. Edna also mentioned that she had heard stories from other employees about strange occurrences in the motel. Still, she always brushed them off as superstitious nonsense. Have you never experienced anything like that? I ask. Any strange occurrences? Edna pauses, her expression thoughtful. Well, there was one time when I was cleaning a room, and I swear I heard someone calling my name. I thought it was just the wind at first, but the voice sounded so real. It gave me a chill. She shudders, her eyes distant with memory. I nod, unsure what to make of her story. Even the people who were closest to Sarah were left with more questions than answers. I head back to my room. It was only 9 p.m., but I was tired, so I lay down and drifted asleep. As I closed my eyes, I thought about Sarah and her story. I couldn't help but feel that there was something more to the motel than what had been revealed. Something darker, more sinister. Perhaps the faded photos in the album or the eerie silence seemed to permeate the halls, but I couldn't shake the feeling that a story was yet to be told. I drifted off to sleep, dreaming of the motel and its secrets. In my dreams, I wandered through its empty halls. I could feel the weight of history pressing down on me, and in the distance, I thought I heard the faint strains of a melody, like a distant echo of a time long gone. Suddenly, in my dream, I needed to look at the book I had spotted earlier about the Amity Hotel. Something about it drew me in, and when I went to pick it up, I was awoken by the loud, stuttered squeak like the one from the night prior. I look at the clock again, 3:04 a.m. The dream felt real, and the urge to investigate the book was almost overwhelming. I slip out of bed, padding quietly across the carpeted floor. The eerie silence of the motel seems to press against my ears as I make my way to the bookshelf in the corner. There, nestled between a romance novel and a travel guide, is the worn copy of The Haunting of the Hotel Amity, a true story. I pulled it down, but it only moved slightly, getting stuck when I tried pulling further. Finally, after yanking a bit, I felt it give a little more. It's frozen in place as if it was tipping. Suddenly, I hear an amalgamation of gears turning behind it, and the shelf opens slightly on one side. I pull on the release side, and it opens like a door, leading to a passageway between the walls. I step inside, flicking on my phone's flashlight. The narrow passageway is dimly lit by flickering bulbs every few feet, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air is musty and stale. I make my way down the passageway, the squeak louder the further I go. I can see a dark opening at the end, so I put on a brave face and walk toward it when I hear a voice from the dark opening. I could barely hear it over the loud squeak and couldn't understand what they were saying, but I knew I shouldn't be here anymore, so I sneaked out of the passage. I tried to close the door as slowly as possible, but the voices were approaching fast, so I left it ajar. Rushing into bed, slowly closing the door as it creaked louder than I anticipated. Finally, I was in bed, mind racing with the possibilities of what was in that room at the end of the passageway. The voices grew louder as they approached my room. I shut my eyelids tight. They were right in front of my door. This time, I could faintly make out some words. There were words like her and has to be, and the one that made my heart race was only guest here. The handle turned slowly, and the door creaked open. I loosened my eyelids to peek at who it was, revealing a shadowy figure in the doorway. It was Edna, but there was something different about her. Her usually kind face was twisted in anger, her eyes burning with an unnatural light. She glanced at me for just a moment before she turned her attention back to the others in the hall. "Leave her for now," Edna said. The other voices murmured in agreement, their whispers echoing down the hall. As they turned away, I felt a chill run down my spine. Finally, they leave. I slowly get out of bed, and as quietly as possible, I pack my things. I planned to jump out of the window if I had to. Suddenly, the squeak stopped, and the motel was much too quiet again. The eerie silence of the motel seems to press against my ears as I try to calm my racing thoughts. I close my eyes, but I can't help but feel a sense of dread creeping up on me. Just as I'm about to fall asleep, I hear a faint click coming from the hallway. My heart starts pounding again as I realize someone is moving through the motel, methodically checking each room. The clicking grows louder as the person gets closer, and I hear footsteps outside my door. I lie there, paralyzed. The footsteps pause outside my door, and I hear a low whisper. "She's in here." I freeze. Yeah, she's in there, but Edna doesn't want us to disturb her until Tom says it's time. Tom? I thought to myself, the guy from the diner on my first night? The one that already knew my name before introducing myself? "Man, fuck Tom," one of the voices said. "Just being Jeremiah's son is the only reason we have to listen to that prick. Yeah, unless you want to end up in one of his films, you better listen to that prick," the other man proclaims. The two sets of footsteps walk away from my door. Films? What the hell were they talking about? Why did Edna seem so angry earlier? Why were these men talking about me in the hallway like I was a film project? As the night wears on, I can't help but feel like I'm at the center of some sort of twisted game. I lie awake, listening to the occasional creak of a floorboard or whispered conversation down the hall. Eventually, exhaustion overtakes me, and I fall into a fitful sleep. I first notice the light streaming through the window when I wake up. It's morning, and with it comes a sense of urgency. I quickly dress and gather my things, making my way to the diner. As I approach, I see Tom sitting at a booth, already deep in conversation with Mark. They glance up at me as I enter, and Tom motions for me to join them. "Good morning, sunshine," Tom says with a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. "Care to join us?" I sit across from them, trying to ignore the feeling of unease that settles in my stomach. "Good morning," I manage to say. "So, how are you finding our little motel?" Tom asks, leaning in closer. "I hope we're taking good care of you." There's an undertone to his voice that I can't quite place. I force a smile, trying to appear more confident than I feel. "It's been fine, I guess." Tom raises an eyebrow at my non-committal response. "I hope you don't mean that as a complaint. We've gone to great lengths to ensure you have everything you need." I glance at Mark sitting next to Tom. His expression is unreadable, and he seems to be observing me. "It's not that," I say quickly, hoping to reassure them. I'm not used to being around so little people." "There, that sounds believable. Well, hopefully, you will settle in a little bit before you have to leave. See my brother Mark here?" He gestures over to Mark. "He's in charge of maintenance, and if there's anything he can do to help you feel more comfortable, let him know." Tom says with a forced smile. I nod, still feeling uneasy. "Thank you. I'm sure I'll be fine." I glance around the diner, trying to appear calm and collected. The place is filled with small wooden tables and booths, each covered in a checkered red and white tablecloth. The walls are adorned with old movie posters and black and white photographs of people I assume are famous actors. The air is thick with the scent of coffee and bacon, making my stomach rumble. "So, what's on the menu today?" I ask, hoping to change the subject. Tom hands me a menu, and I scan the options, debating between pancakes and eggs. "I'll have the pancakes, please." I look up at Tom, then Mark, waiting for their response. "Excellent choice," Tom says with a smile. "I'm sure you'll enjoy them." "Mark, will you go ahead and get our order?" Mark nods and stands, making his way over to the waitress. I watch him go, still feeling a sense of unease. The air between Tom and me has become heavy, and I can't help but wonder what they want from me. As I wait for our food, I glance around the diner again, hoping to find some escape route. The exit is right behind me, but a large man is sitting in a booth by the door, looking like he might be a bouncer at a bar. I don't want to make a scene, but I must leave. The waitress returns with our food, setting down plates of steaming hot pancakes in front of us. The aroma is intoxicating, and my stomach grumbles in anticipation. I pick up my fork, debating whether or not to eat anything at all. Tom glances at my plate and smiles reassuringly as if he can read my mind. A few bites in, I realize my anxiety won't let me eat anymore. I try to find an excuse to leave and investigate the motel further.
I'm sorry, Tom.
I feel like I need some fresh air, I say, smiling. I'm going to step outside for a bit, maybe go for a walk, I say, hoping he doesn't hear my voice shake. Tom nods understandingly. Of course, Riley. Take your time. We'll be right here if you need anything. He reaches across the table and gently pats my hand, his expression softening. I push my chair back and stand up, trying to appear calm and confident as I walk towards the exit. As I pass by the large man in the booth, he gives me a quick once-over before returning to his meal. The air outside is cool and crisp, and I take a deep breath of fresh air. The motel is just across the street, and I can see Tom and Mark sitting in the diner, watching me. I stroll down the sidewalk, pretending to look at the shops along the way. But really, my attention is focused on the motel. The neon sign flickers above the door, casting an eerie glow on the building. The rooms are arranged in a U shape around a central courtyard. I pause for a moment, debating whether or not to go inside. A part of me wants to know what Tom and Mark are up to, but another part is terrified of what I might find. Before I can decide, a car pulls beside me and a woman rolls down her window. "Hey, honey, need a ride somewhere?" she asks, her voice laced with a southern drawl. She's probably around my mom's age, with long, curly, graying hair and a warm smile. Something about her seems genuine, and I trust her for a moment. No thanks, I'm feeling sick, so I'm going back to my room," I said before quickly walking away. It felt like the entire town was watching me. I make my way back to the motel, my heart racing. I try to calm my nerves as I approach my room. As soon as I unlock the door, I collapse onto the bed, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and fear wash over me. I close my eyes and try to think about anything else, but I can't shake the feeling of anxiety. Now is an excellent time to look further into the dark opening at the end of the passageway I found last night. I carefully walk down the hallway, feeling the cool air from the vent blowing against my face. The walls are covered in peeling wallpaper, and a strong, musty odor makes me feel uneasy. As I approach the bookshelf, I attempt to reach for the Amity Hotel book, but when I pull it, nothing happens. I didn't dream that whole thing, did I? No, they must have changed the book. So I go through each individual book, pulling each one carefully. "Can I help you find anything in particular?" Edna said with a bit of contempt as she snuck up behind me. I spun around, startled. "Oh, no. Just, looking for a book I thought I saw." Edna raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Well, you're not going to find it here," she said, gesturing to the bookshelf. "Those books are just for show." She paused, studying me for a moment. "Why were you looking for, anyway?" "It was something about a hotel in Amity. Considering where I am, I thought it would be a good read," I reply, still trying to play it cool. Edna chuckles darkly. "Oh, that's Tom and Mark's favorite. One of them probably took it with them." "Oh, okay. I'll look for something else then," I say, glancing back at the bookshelf. Edna watches me for a moment before disappearing back into her room. I stand there momentarily before continuing to search for the book lever that opens the bookshelf, trying to be as quiet as possible. Finally, one book will only pull out some of the way. It had to be another lever, but remembering how loud the hidden door was, I decided to wait to pull it when I hear the loud squeak tonight, hoping it would mask most of the sound of the gears turning behind the door. Late that night, I creep out of my room and return to the bookshelf. The air is thick with the smell of stale cigarette smoke. I carefully yank the book out as far as it could go before I could hear the gears. I'm confident the squeak is loud enough to mask the bookshelf. I opened it and slid into the passageway leading to the dark opening. I step inside, and the squeak is almost too much, but I press on. I hear multiple men talking loudly and laughing as I enter the room. As I turn the corner, I can see lights dancing on the wall like someone was watching an old movie, and the smell of cigar smoke fills my lungs. Quietly moving further in, I can see a giant old movie projector that was making the stuttered squeak from its giant bent and dented film rolls scraping against the side of the projector. I look to see what is playing on the screen, but I'm distracted by about 8 men, mostly old except Tom, Mark, and another younger-looking man. They don't see me, or they don't care enough to acknowledge me. They were sitting in a makeshift movie theater, but none of the fun. Finally, I looked up at the screen and felt sick. They were showing a homemade old snuff film. Then I realized it couldn't be that old since I recognized Tom and Mark. They were doing unspeakable things with women of all ages. I looked down at the group of men and see them all staring at me with a menacingly evil grin. I froze in immense fear. Staring at them for an eternity, I suddenly felt a sting in my neck, like someone had injected me with something. As my vision darkened, I could see the face of the man holding me with one hand and a syringe in the other. It was the bouncer-looking man I had seen in the diner. When I wake up, my head is pounding. The room is spinning, and my vision is blurry. I can see little memory flashes of the group picking me up and moving me to the room next to the makeshift theater. My clothes are gone, and I'm naked except for a loose robe. There's a sour taste in my mouth, and my body feels heavy and sour. I'm tied to a mattress that smells like sweat and fear. I struggle against my bonds, but they're too tight. I see an antique film camera on an even older tripod. There were huge lights all around me that were turned off. Suddenly, they were blinding me as I heard the men laughing. "Oh, Walter Cronkite, what will we do with you?" I recognized Tom's voice. "You were this close." A shame, but I can't say I'm surprised. You have a lot of fight, and we love that. The men laugh way too hard. The camera is pointed at me. It's old and dusty, but still working. I close my eyes and try to steel my nerves, but I can't help but feel sick. The memory of the snuff film plays over and over in my head, and I can't shake the feeling that I'm about to be a part of it. Now, Tom," I hear Mark say, his voice steady and calm. "No need for that. We've got plans for Anderson Cooper here." The other men chuckle menacingly. "She's going to be a star." As Tom approaches me, I hear most men leave the room, and Mark sets up behind the camera. "You want to know the full story, Hunter S. Thompson? I think you deserve to know at this point," Tom says as he undoes his belt. "Well, let me fill in some blanks for you." He sits next to me on the floor after taking off his shirt. "You see, my father, Jeremiah, had a great business going here, and I'm not talking about the motel. He would lure women to stay here, where he would drug them and film himself having his way with them while someone filmed through the two-way mirror. It was a great business, those films. Rich people from all around the world would buy them. Plus, most women never even knew what happened by the time they checked out, but the ones who gave us trouble had to be dealt with. Eventually, my mom, Sarah, got a little too nosy. She kept asking about how my father could make so much money while running a motel, so she snooped into his things and found some evidence that would crumble our entire family. She confided her findings to her two oldest sons, but when she realized they were in on it too, she went crazy. We tried to keep her quiet, but she wouldn't let it go. Finally, one day, she couldn't take the guilt, and the madwoman opened every unlocked room. She would set anything flammable on fire. Eventually, the fire got out of control and started to spread. The fire killed my brother and father, along with a lot more of the women my mom was trying to save. We finally stopped it, and being about 20 at the time, I already knew what was going on and was more than ready to take it over with some improvements. He stops for a second, reminiscing on memories. He touches my face softly with the back of his hand. It's a rough hand that feels like sandpaper scraping my cheek. I was going to leave my mother alive, but when she kept talking about saving victims' spirits, she was making me nervous. I was close with my mother as a kid, so I didn't have the heart to kill her myself, but Mark here, he gestured toward Mark behind the camera. He's a cold, hard killer. He stares at Mark for a long time. We couldn't do it out in the open like my father and brothers did, so I had them build passages into the walls of the hallways, opened by various bookshelves, and added a whole hidden room at the end. Doing it during the restoration, it was a perfect cover. We still use all the equipment my father used. As you can see, he gestures to the antique camera that was now filming them. It's a bitch to find someone willing to develop the film, let alone someone who won't ask questions. But I had to keep it this way to honor my father and brother's legacy. He pauses, leaning close to me, his breath hot on my ear. And now, it's your turn. You're going to be the next big star. You're going to have your own room. He gestures around the damp, death-filled room. Your own things. You'll be taken care of and never have to leave. You'll be part of the family. His hand runs through my hair, cupping the back of my head. And Mark, don't forget to get some shots of my good side. Oh, I won't, Mark says with a chuckle. He walks around me, positioning himself so the camera can point straight at my face. I try to shrug off the chills that run down my spine as I think about the stories Tom has just told me, and all I see is a lost man looking for something to hold on to. Tom gets on top of me and starts kissing my neck, and I feel like throwing up. I can feel the ropes on the left hand are loose, so I take a minute to wiggle it out without letting anyone in the room notice. Once I got that hand free, I could get the other free, but I wasn't ready to fight back. I needed to wait for the right time. Suddenly, the camera audibly stops recording, and Tom notices and looks back at Mark. What the hell is going on? Tom asks angrily. The film got stuck. Shit. I'm going to have to get a whole new one. Hold on 1 second. Mark says as he turns his back to exit the room. Tom gets up, and I finally feel like I can breathe properly. His back is turned, inspecting the camera. Old fucking thing, Tom says to himself. I take the opportunity to untie both ankles. As soon as I'm free, I lunge forward, wrapping my arms around Tom's waist and pulling him off balance. He lets out a surprised yelp as we both crash to the ground. I scramble to my feet and take a few steps back, breathing hard. Tom glares at me, looking furious. You little bitch, he shouts. You think you can just take it from me? From my family? He scrambles to his feet as well, advancing on me slowly. I could kill you where you stand. I back away, my heart pounding in my chest. I'm not going to let you do this, I say, trying to sound more confident than I feel. I'm not going to be another victim. Tom laughs darkly, his eyes narrowing. Oh, you think you're so special? You think you're the first one to say no? He steps closer. You're just like all the others. You're just another piece of meat. My anger boils over, and I launch myself at him again. We wrestle for a moment, both of us grunting with exertion. He's stronger than me, but I push him against the bookshelf, where he loses his balance, and his head falls onto the corner of a dirt-stained counter. I walk slowly toward him, and I can see a pool of blood forming around his matted blonde hair. He's not breathing. Mark, who must have heard the commotion, runs, and just then, he freezes while looking down at his brother. No, 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 no. Tom, you can't do this to me. I can't do this shit alone. Mark is sobbing while holding his brother's blood-soaked head. I saw my opportunity and took it. I try to run past Mark, but he catches me by the ankle, making me drop to the floor. You're not leaving, he shouts, his voice hoarse with rage. He pulls a knife from his pocket, his hands trembling with fury. You'll tell everyone you're sorry, and then come with me. I kick him in the face as hard as I can, making him release his grip on my ankle. He clutches his nose, blood pouring between his fingers. I turn and run, hearing him screaming obscenities behind me. I bolt out of the room, racing through the building while luckily not alerting anyone, not knowing where I'm going. I have to get out of here. Outside, the air is cold and damp, the fog rolling off the ocean. I'm disoriented, my heart pounding in my chest. I am still determining where I am, but I know I must find help. I start running, my lungs burning with each ragged breath. I come to a main road, a car's headlights blinding me as it speeds past. I wave my arms frantically, but the driver doesn't notice. Panic starts to rise up inside me as I realize that I'm alone and that no one knows what happened. I can't go back there, not after what I've done. I start to walk, trying to figure out where I'm going. My feet are cold and numb, but I keep moving. The fog thickens, making it hard to see more than a few feet in front of me. I wish I had a cell phone to call the police and get help. After what feels like hours of walking, I finally spot a street light. It's barely enough light to see by, but it's better than nothing. I walk towards it, hoping there might be a nearby house or business where I can find help. As I get closer, I see a police officer at a red light. I run to him, probably looking like a crazy crackhead with only a robe, and I'm sure I smell like death. The officer looks at me with a mixture of surprise and concern. "Help me," I gasp out between breaths. These people, they, I find myself unable to talk or see the words for what has happened. The officer takes my arm, his grip firm but not painful. He looks at me with concern, his brow furrowed. "Take it easy. You're safe now. What's your name?" I tell him my name, feeling the fog of shock starting to lift from my brain. "Okay, why don't you tell me what happened?" I spend the next hour or so trying to explain everything to him, not caring how crazy I sound. He listens intently, occasionally asking questions or nodding his head. When I finish, he sighs heavily, rubbing his eyes with the heels of his hands. "Okay, I need you to come to the station with me. We'll get this all sorted out." We take off in his cruiser. I spent the night at the police station, retelling my story to a half-dozen people and getting medical care. The officer who saved me last night told me they sent someone this morning to the motel to check it out. He said that night, no one except Edna was in the building. She let them look around, and eventually, they found the hidden passages in the walls leading to the basement where they found everything. They arrested Edna, and she denied involvement, but they kept her for further questioning. They claim Edna was the only one there, so Mark must have gotten away. That was a little over a decade ago, and they still haven't located Mark. Maybe he's dead in a ditch where he belongs. Still, maybe, just perhaps, he could recreate their operation at a new motel. Anytime I see one, I have PTSD flashbacks of laying on that dirty mattress. Once, I was shopping at a department store and saw this guy on every lane I went down. He never looked at me enough to get a good look at his face, but eventually, he left after I locked myself in the bathroom for an hour. It's funny how the mind works. I'll be watching a movie, and I'll see a character get kidnapped, and I'll think, at least they didn't cut my ear off like that guy did. Third story, Theater Kids' Haunted House. I went to school in a more rural area more than 10 years ago. I was a kid who played in orchestra and took art classes. I always wanted to take a theater class, but it seemed like I couldn't ever get it crunched into my class schedules. Just like our arts program, they didn't have a good budget. They seemed to always have more than enough for our school's football and baseball team, which always did excellent. But our school had such a beautiful theater. It was connected to the classroom and had a decent-sized stage. It was near Halloween, and somehow the teacher got it approved to make a small haunted house get up with the theater kids being employees. Tickets were only a few bucks, and all proceeds would fund the theater program. It was gonna be successful. It gave kids a chance to get out of class for a good 10 minutes, or so, which many desperately would do anything for. They'd have a kid come classroom to classroom, and those who wanted to enter could follow them. I became excited when one knocked on the door during my art class. A handful of us followed the kid who wasn't dressed up to the drama classroom. The teacher sat at a table and collected money. She told us a few rules and pointers. 1. Don't touch the actors. 2. The actors won't touch you. 3. Stay in the roped area. 4. Failure to do so will result in a trip to the principal's office. I handed over my $3 and walked towards the entrance. The door was held by a kid wearing a black hooded robe and had on some of those stitches next to his mouth you could get at a Halloween store. He had black face paint around his eyes. Good luck? He snickered. Felt cheesy. They had ropes lined up tied to traffic cones as a pathway. The things I seen were pretty decent, but some cliché. I seen a handful of kids getting scared too. The stage had a closet area next to with wardrobe, which explained some of the things seen. It also had an audience area in front of the stage where all the chairs were stacked away. The closet area had bars in front where someone had monster makeup on and they were hollering and doing a cheesy laugh. They were wearing their school clothes too. They had the room pretty dark and had some fog machines. Some of the things I seen were some of the girls acting in distress and asking for help. Some people pretending to be psych patients. Some would run towards the rope and scream. They had tombstones in some areas that were made from styrofoam. Creepy music was playing from the PA system. Some other guests walking through would crack jokes and make fun of the actors. I just kept to myself and took in the atmosphere. Obviously, it had to be pretty tame since it was in a school, so no fake blood or pretend weapons. What really threw me off, though, was when I looked up at the ceiling. There was an area where some lights were very dimmed, and it looked like a dummy was hanging by a rope. There was no way the school would have approved of that. I went through the rest of the haunt where we go back into the classroom. Another student held out a bucket full of Halloween candy and thanked those who came and supported the theater program. The teacher asked a couple students what they thought, and she got some mixed answers. It was great. Thanks for doing this. It wasn't scary. She asked me and I told her I enjoyed it, but I was curious how they were able to hang up a dummy or prop in the ceiling. She looked at me as if I said something stupid. She asked me what I was taking about, and I explained it once more. She walked in the theater and demanded everyone leave for the moment. I followed behind, and she turned on the lights once the room was clear. She let out a horrifying scream that will never leave my memory. She pulled out her phone and called 911 and told me to go grab the principal. I sprinted to the office and told them what happened, and they ran to the theater. EMTs, firefighters, police swarmed the school and classes were canceled the rest of the week. They had to use a cherry picker to pull that kid down. His name was Wesley. He was part of the class. The investigation team determined it wasn't a suicide. He was murdered. Police interviewed the whole theater classes. They interviewed me as well, to which I explained what I seen. The cameras only were showing where he walked into the classroom and never came out. They assume it had to either have been one of the theater students or the teacher. They ruled out it being someone who walked through because of the timing, yet he didn't come into class super early either. They never truly discovered who did it either. Many of the kids got pulled out by their parents. Mrs. Mack was fired and sued, though she won. The theater program was shut down for several years. The reason I'm writing about this is because I recently became the orchestra teacher at this school. I'd hear rumors every once in a blue moon from another student that they claimed to have seen a ghost, and even a teacher mentioned it once in the lounge. I always pushed the idea of it away. But recently I had to borrow a couple of extra chairs from the theater room and told the teacher I'd bring them back at the end of the day. Once school let out and I finished closing up my area, I began carrying the chairs to the theater. When I opened the door, I noticed the room was freezing compared to what it was before. I stacked the chairs up and heard a noise. It was coming from the top and sounded like a rope getting tight. It was Wesley. He looked transparent and was smiling at me. I let out a scream, and he let one back out that was horrifying. I ran to do the exit door and tripped on my way out. Another teacher seen me on the ground and came to my aid. I told her I seen something in there. She looked in and said she seen nothing. I'm going to talk to the theater teacher and see if there's some way I can talk with Wesley. I feel so scared, but we'll keep you updated. Fourth story. I think I encountered a Wendigo. My wife and I have been running the rat race for years, with a family, a house in the city, 2 dogs, a cat, the stereotypical American dream. But the city took its toll, the neighborhood got worse, the crime rose, and we found ourselves looking for a way out. Our opportunity came when I was offered a new job out of state. It was a great career move, but we didn't want to move to a new city just to have the same problems again. So we started looking around and found a great mountain community about an hour and a half from the job, and a great ranch-style house with a big back porch, windows everywhere, and a lot of property. The backyard has a big grassy area, and a creek that cuts the property in half, then acres of woods beyond. It's huge. The house is more than twice the size of our house in the city. It's all updated, and has no neighbors within a mile. It's a radical change from the life we lived in the city, but best of all, it was less than half of what we were paying for our old house. The house was a foreclosure, and when we asked the listing agent about it, she simply said the old family had abandoned the property. We really didn't think anything of it. The first 3 months were uneventful, with us settling into our new life, the kids getting used to the new school and new friends, and most of all, us getting used to the big house and property. But then the weather turned cold and things started to get weird on the property. It started with noises from the back property, things we chalked up to being in the woods. Then the motion lights around the house started going off randomly. Once again, we just chalked it up to being in the woods. But last night, it all changed. Last night was the most terrifying night of my life. One of the dogs was at the back door whining and scratching. I assumed he needed to go to the bathroom, so I grabbed my flashlight and walked out the back door. Instantly, something felt off. The dog bolted for the back property, growling and snarling. It was a cold night, about 30 degrees. But the dog plunged straight into the creek and out the other bank, running off into the woods in the back of the property. Flashlight bouncing, I ran after him, calling his name. I got to the creek and made my way across the makeshift bridge, trying desperately to follow him. I could hear the dog still growling and barking from somewhere up ahead, and I pushed further away from the safety of the house and deeper into the woods. That's when I heard it. A shriek like I've never heard before in my life. It was a mix of a moaning wail and metal on metal. It echoed through the trees and froze me in my tracks. My dog bounded its way back to me and cowered down behind me. I turned around and could just make out the warm glow of the house behind me and the cold dark ahead of me. I swung my flashlight around wildly looking for the source of the noise. And that's when I heard an even more terrifying noise. Out of the cold silence, my wife's voice floated all around me. "Babe," the voice called out. I whipped back around and could just barely make out the image of my wife, safely inside our house. The voice called out again. "Babe, I'm right here," came the voice from deeper into the woods. Then came another voice, just as clear as the other. It was my dad's voice. "Come out here," it called. I swung the flashlight around again, and this time caught the briefest glint of light bouncing off of eyes. The creature was in my beam of light for barely a second, but it was tall, maybe 6 feet, and ashen white. It had long, spindly fingers that grasped the trunk of a pine tree, and then it was gone. I turned back and ran towards the house. I ran headlong into the icy creek and stumbled. My dog ran past me, making it back to the yard and up to the porch. I dug my hands into the freezing, muddy bank and pulled myself out, not stopping to look back. When I reached the porch, I scrambled inside. My wife ran over to me, asking what had happened. I just shook my head. I'm not certain myself what happened. I had a growing sense of dread tonight as the sun began to fall. We kept the dogs inside, and I haven't dared to look out the back. But as I sit here typing, one by one, my motion lights in the backyard keep going on. Fifth story. The Haunting of Willowbrook Manor. A Descent into Darkness. It was an innocent decision, or so I thought. I had always been fascinated by the supernatural, drawn to the eerie tales that sent shivers down my spine. Little did I know that my curiosity would lead me down a path of terror and despair, into the heart of an otherworldly nightmare. It began when I stumbled upon an obscure ad in a local newspaper. Seeking brave souls, Willowbrook Manor, the most haunted house in the country. The allure was undeniable, and against my better judgment, I decided to embark on this perilous journey. Arriving at Willowbrook Manor, I was greeted by an imposing Victorian mansion, shrouded in an ominous mist. Its dilapidated facade exuded an air of desolation and decay. Despite the chill in the air, I felt an inexplicable warmth tugging at my insides, urging me to explore its haunted halls. Stepping through the creaking double doors, I was enveloped in a suffocating darkness that seemed to whisper ancient secrets. The air was thick with a tangible sense of foreboding. As I cautiously made my way through the labyrinthine corridors, I could hear distant whispers and disembodied footsteps echoing from unseen corners. Rooms that had long been abandoned sprung to life, each with its own spectral inhabitants. The spirit of a tormented artist, forever trapped in the pursuit of his masterpiece. The ghostly echoes of a child's laughter, accompanied by the phantom cries of a grieving mother. Shadows danced along the walls, mocking my feeble attempts to escape their clutches. The nights were the worst. As the moon bathed Willowbrook Manor in an ethereal glow, the spirits grew restless, their presence intensifying. The walls seemed to breathe, and the paintings that lined them twisted and contorted into macabre scenes. The anguished cries of the damned resonated through the halls, sending chills down my spine. Sleep became a distant memory as nightmares plagued my every moment. Visions of apparitions with hollow eyes, their spectral fingers caressing my soul. Dreams of being trapped in a never-ending maze, pursued by nameless horrors. Each night was an endless descent into darkness, robbing me of my sanity. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself spiraling deeper into the clutches of Willowbrook Manor. The line between reality and the supernatural blurred, leaving me questioning my very existence. The spirits seemed to feed off my fear, growing stronger with each passing day. I sought solace in the online communities, sharing my experiences and searching for answers. But all I found were others trapped in their own haunted nightmares, their lives forever intertwined with the malevolent forces that plagued Willowbrook Manor. It was a curse that bound us together, a collective suffering that no one else could comprehend. Now, as I sit here in the flickering candlelight, writing this desperate account, I can feel the presence of the spirits closing in. Their icy breath caresses my neck, whispering promises of eternal torment. I know that escape is impossible, that I am forever condemned to wander the halls of Willowbrook Manor, a prisoner of my own curiosity. So, dear reader, heed my warning. If you ever come across an invitation to Willowbrook Manor, cast it aside. For within its walls lies a darkness that will consume your very soul. And once you enter, there is no turning back.